Well, good morning. Um, I can't say happy Orange Shirt Day or happy TRC Day because this is really a day of mourning for us, where we allow ourselves, at least on this one day of the year, to more fully drop into whatever our experiences have been or haven't been in relation to the truth and reconciliation processes, in relation to the Indian residential schools, and also in relation to all of the unfolding that has happened since with the murdered and missing Indigenous women, with the 60 scoop, with the still super high rates of children coming into care. There's a lot to hold today for many of us. And I woke up dreaming about my mother this morning. And so my mother was a residential school survivor from Duck Lake, Saskatchewan, a well-known school. Uh, Became known as St. Michael's later, but so yeah, and I was thinking about a conversation we just had at our retreat about, I am in my mother's womb when she is in her mother's womb. And how is it on this day then that we hold all these multiple levels of ancestral and intergenerational trauma simultaneously? So I guess I just want to open with that, since it's fresh out of my dream state, and also want to bring in a smudge for us. And if you do have materials, sacred materials that you connect with on your end, I welcome you to connect to the medicine. I also have a fire, a flame burning here for us, and a bowl of sacred water. Maybe it would be a sacred cup of tea or coffee, the water of life. How do you wish to connect and land right now? And when we receive the smudge, we just welcome our plant relatives to come into the space with us, where we know we're always in need of support. And today, on this day especially, many of us are in need of support. So just cleansing our minds, just as we might do with our breath or in our meditation, cleansing our eyes, our mouth. May I speak truth today. Our ears, may I listen carefully for the blessings that each person has to offer. My heart, I have a broken heart today. May be able to hold that with presence and grace. My womb, my belly button, my connection to my mother, my grandmother, and all the generations before. And also to honor my father, who always believed in smudging our feet, the portal to Earth Mother, where we land in connection to her. May we always walk softly and gently upon Earth Mother, especially remembering on this day that many of these still deeply painful atrocities are very much connected to these lands, to the devastation of these lands, to the extraction of these lands that we still coexist upon. So some prayers for Mother Earth as well, where she's going through all of it with us and for us. I think I'll say that for my opening in. And I don't know, Lynn, was there anything that you wanted to say as we headed into the process?
I think just that to be kind and patient with ourselves and to stay as grounded as we can. This is difficult. And it's common that we might go into a numb, kind of a freeze state or into a fight or flight. So to stay as present as we can and be kind with ourselves and our responses, that this is hard. And we're going to listen to um, maybe Fire, you could just say a little bit about what we're going to be listening in the art, and then I'll share that.
Okay. So I created this art piece directly after receiving the news of the 215 unmarked graves that were found at Kamloops Residential School in 2021. Seems like so much longer ago, and yet so fresh at the same time. So I created this piece out of food. I'm currently and have been since COVID working with food paint that I make myself. This one is blueberry, beet, a little bit of turmeric, maybe some coffee, some ash, or probably some sweetgrass. And so I was just really landing in my body and in my heart and trying to release it in some way. I felt this really dense feeling of like, oh no, couldn't believe it, had to believe it. Like just this whole mixed up amount of emotions about it. And I think part of what was really resonating from my mom's experience at school, which I knew some about, and my grandmother's experience at school, which I also knew some about, but I knew how hard it made them. And so when I realized that at least 50% of the kids in the schools that my mother and grandmother attended died in the schools themselves and never returned, I gained a new appreciation for my mother and my grandmother, and also created this piece of art. And along with the art, I have a process called streaming, which I encourage you today, if you feel like streaming. It's just like writing down whatever is coming up for you in a stream of consciousness as it arrives. No periods, no commas, no capitalizing, no deciding whether it fits or doesn't fit. Or also to art along if you are equipped for such an activity. And so I streamed alongside my art. Every so often I would pause in the art creation and I would stream. Oh, here's what's happening, right? Here's what's going on. And then I would catch my breath again and I would enter back into the arting and I would art some more. And then I would stream some more. And so following that flow, a couple days later, after I had some time to recover, I created this piece of poetry that is accompanying the art piece today, and that I've shared several times now, but is always super emotional for me. And I'm so happy to see some of the people I know and love. Sharon Barnes, oh my goodness, it's been so long. Yeah, so just really so happy to be supported here by some of my pack with Life as Medicine and some of my long-term friends, and much appreciate that.
When I Heard the Recent Horrific News by Fiery Jean Groudlin. When I heard the recent horrific news, I took it directly to my hearts. I grabbed my food paints, my blueberry beet, and made a pour. On a big page, this is a big event. Wake up, Canada, I pray. Swirl and twirl, flow and shake, 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 shake. I am shaking, all shook up. Oh, my mind is all in a twirl and swirl with all my racing thoughts. Thoughts, feelings, impulses, imaginings, what ifs. Thick and stuck, blueberry beet blob finally begins flowing freely, mingled with my tears, moving into yet unknown shape. Using end of brush to scrape, I attempt to alter flow. No, blueberry beet, a determined medicine, will go where they flow. They know. Quickly, I change my strategy. Now I struggle for containment. I run Blueberry Beat to create a box to confine flow before we go off the edge. Oh, look, 4 directions. Yes, that works. Some tenuous balance for now. Wait, confinement. That is what Indian residential schooling is all about. Severing our connection to family, community, language, culture, land. Confining, ostracizing, ridiculing, evilizing, demonizing, soaping, strapping, kneeling, bowing, obeying, stopping flow of our cultural continuity, our creativity, civilizing, missionizing, making us Western, Christian clones, denying, eliminating our rights to be, to believe, to belong, to become. I notice. I'm holding my breath. I breathe. Breathe again. Now, a little more settled, I peer at my image, spinning it around and around. I am a little more contained, a little less overwhelmed, a little safer within my box. I allow myself to breathe again, to sense into feelings, stored, embodied. Clench of jaw, stabbing in head, twist in gut, fear first and foremost, then waves of grief and outrage. I see all at once image captures me, clearly a self-portrait. When I heard the recent horrific news, my hair stood up on back of my neck like porcupine. A cold, fear-filled feeling edged up around my whole head, permeated every cell. Fog flooded my brain. In this moment, Blueberry Beat brain looks like dried blood, with dark, chunky parts, shadows. Now, my mind is blank, and then I fled in fragments, as we all do. My traumatizing years at Sacred Heart Mission School, bloody, black and blue. Stories of my mother at Duck Lake Convent, her mother at boarding school. Stories of hundreds of survivors' descendants heard at IRSS, TRC hearings. Every story, fragment, every mention of lost ones, spoken with hushed fear, eyes wide, still afraid to speak once silenced truths. Indigenous children starved, smothered, overworked, beaten, strapped until breaking into strangling sobs, sick with TB, diseases, accidents, no medical attention, died. I am out of breath, heart racing too fast, metallic bile, fear taste filling mouth. Slow down, breathe. One more breath. One more. Some ran away and still never returned, disappeared. Families were still hoping their babies would still show up someday, till the recent horrific news. Infants born, fathered by priests, thrown into furnaces. Some children burnt in fires, buried in walls, basements, fields, riverbanks, out back. Children buried by children, their relatives, their friends, the survivors. Now adults, whispering shameful truths, wanting forgiveness for their part, for being survivors. Sob catches in my throat, honoring our shared bundle, intergenerational guilt and shame. The lost ones were never seen again. Never ever seen again. Never spoken of again in the schools. These secret, shameful truths will continue to emerge, erupt, bubble to the surface like coffins in Denbo, Alberta. We who experienced, we who witnessed, knew. Do not disobey nuns or priests or teachers in any way. Not in any way, or you too will disappear. Poof! Cold blue tingle of old fears run up and down my spine. Hairs on arms, on neck, on head stand straight up. I embrace porcupine medicine, gentle, kind, self-protective. I am calmer now. I keep painting layers of food color, medicines, and my mind keeps incessantly worrying, swirling, wondering. These were clergy, bureaucrats. They invented paperwork, forms, and numbers. Why were no notices sent to waiting mothers, fathers, grandparents? Why were no bodies of children transported home for ceremonies? Records of letters to grieving mothers say an unwarranted expenditure. An unwarranted expenditure. Heartless, like Duncan Campbell Scott. Why were there no grave markers? No records kept? No counting? Just shame-filled secret burials, many in mass graves. IRS schools, known by children passing by as the place where dead babies live. Like Kamloops, 215 found so far. Tip of iceberg, cold blue shiver. My mind swirls and twirls with too much information. TMI. Time to take a breath. And another. What about 130 plus IRS schools not yet viewed through newer tech, ground penetrating radar? Did you know, as early as 1904, Canadian government actually knew? Dr. Peter Henderson Bryce reported inadequate funding was causing 1 in 4 Indigenous children to die in Indian residential schools. In some schools, documented deaths were 65%. I just found out. In my mom's school, it was 50%. I am grateful she survived her battle with TB to birth me and 6 others. There was a lobby for abolition of residential schools. The Catholic Church successfully resisted. To this day, RCs have never apologized, never made amends for their very large part in saving our souls. Breathe. I remind myself, breathe again. I am trying to remain grounded while allowing myself to struggle with deep and dark shadow cast. I know. Envision light all around me, within me. I grab my turmeric yellow. No, too bright. Daub with leftover coffee. Thin with dandelion. Bitter is better. I think of beautiful, now adult daughter. I am grateful. I am able to mother. I am grateful for all light-filled children in my world, our shared world. I imagine all our amazing, resilient spirits, brilliance, radiance, innocence, creative life force intact. I daub light medicine, love and light all around. All lost children, all grieving families, all those directly and indirectly impacted by the recent horrific news. I am finding it hard to hold light for long with this huge, looming, deep and dark shadow resurfacing. Of course we knew, those able to listen, to pay attention. We all had opportunity to know. There were many deaths reported. We heard about them in testimonies, 6,500 testimonies, thousands of stories, fear-filled, sorrow-drenched retellings, before unspoken truths. TRC reported, tracked 3,000 plus known deaths in 6 short years of hearings. 6 of the 94 calls to action called for mapping, ceremonies, markers, commemoration, protection of cemeteries and burial sites. Justice Sinclair himself guesstimated 6,000 deaths. Right now, in this moment, I can't help it. I begin to do the math. Given the 150,000 Indigenous children imprisoned in the 130 plus schools, even just counting for now schools on the TRC list, and we know many more, I do the math. 1 in 4 is more like 37,500. 37,500 Indigenous children, plus. Indigenous children who never went home, back to mother's arms, dumped unceremoniously in unmarked graves, no right to be, believe, belong, or become. Time to pause, to take a breath, to hold my heart, to focus on light, which of course quickly gives way to waves of fear, of outrage, of grief, as I acknowledge terror, horror of this violence, genocide, continuing today. I want to yell, this is not just a sad chapter in Canadian history. These realities are all still alive, reverberating in our lives today, every day. Murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, two-spirited, escalating suicide rates, child welfare systems continuing family breakup, overpopulated correctional systems, boil water advisories, environmental racism with epic cancer fatalities, relentless extractive industries destroying, capitalizing on our sacred lands, our Mother Earth. Let's acknowledge, like gender-based violence, even recorded stats only tracked direct deaths. What happens to death tolls when we count numbers that survived and ended their lives early. From onset of diseases seeded in childhood malnutrition, in improper care for TB and other diseases, or immunization experiments, from accidents, injuries sustained in schools, from lifetimes of injurious mental health treatments, from self-medicating, self-harming, survival strategies to escape pain-filled memories, from early educational trauma, making return to school impossible, resulting in mortality from poverty, food insecurity, and homelessness. From violence once perpetrated on us and now passed on laterally, intergenerationally, now our shame, our blame. What about all who survived to never want to be Indian again? Who were afraid to live lives as Indigenous peoples, who protected children by not sharing identities, languages, ceremonies, stories. I am feeling exhausted. I need to re-energize. I reach to Grandfather Sun, Grandmother Moon, Star Nations. I reach to light, again and again encircling blue and red, coffeeed, bitter yellow, bringing light to outrage, to grief, to fear, to guilt and shame, returning again and again to shadow, to light, and endless cycles, round and round, up and down, hold it all in, let it all go, let it all go. Like our ancestors before us, when we feel waves of pain, we reach for our ceremonies, our smudge, drums, pipes, songs, dances, our arts, our hearts. I remember sacred pain of Sundance. I offer this, all of this, to Creator. Sacred ash from spring ceremonies, fast fire, calls to me. I prayerfully encircle, whole edge, black ash needs onion tears. Black ash needs blue, black and blue, blue tinged everywhere, for icy cold shiver, still within. May we all let the recent horrific news in. May we all let the recent horrific news remind us that the long shadow cast by the dark chapter of Canadian history is still unfolding. Past cannot be past until trauma is released and harmony is restored. As Carolyn Bennett, current Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, tells it, once you know the truth, you cannot unknow the truth of this. You cannot unknow the truth of this. May we all hold our hearts and surround all with love and light. For all lost ones, safe journey home to Creator. For all grieving families and communities, healing circles of comfort. May we honor traumas and strengths of all survivors and descendants. May we continuously acknowledge truths of genocide in our past and present by offering our healing arts, our hearts. We invite you, share your response arts with us. How did the recent horrific news impact you and your loved ones? Let us co-create a heartfelt community of care through an evolving installation, a memorial gallery, a public statement of our concern. May we work together for change, engaging actively in reconciliations, like lobbying Canadian government to resource all calls for action, the TRC, the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women's Inquiry, the 60 Scoop. May we ask the Catholic Church to apologize and finally make amends. And may we educate all Canadians to wake up. Wake up, Canada. Embrace our shadow. Become lighter together.
Let's sit with that for a few minutes in silence. Remember to breathe. You might be noticing a lot of energy in your body and your heart. If you need to be a bit more grounded, you could notice your breath. You could notice your body supported in the chair. You could hold your own hands, put your hands on your heart. Let's let this be here. Might be helpful to look around the room. If it's getting a bit intense, sometimes we could bring ourselves back into this moment in time. Not to take our attention away from our experience, to be aware that we're here in this moment, whatever experience we're having. Breathe. So I'm going to share a moment of my experience with this, and then Fiery will as well. Just to kind of bring some voice to this. I've listened to this for the first time on Saturday morning and having a fairly similar experience to what I'm having right now in my body. Extreme heaviness in my chest, grief, heartbreaking, and lots of images of children and sadness, grief about that. And knowing that that's not over now, this isn't the past. And just breathing and working with thoughts. It's quite a practice to be able to let something in, especially for me. I'm a white settler background, and the responsibility, the accountability, the knowing of my own white privilege and of what my ancestors were part of and what I still am. So that's part of it. And just the overwhelming awareness of how difficult this was for the children and for their families, and it continues to be. And the immensity of this. This is an atrocity. It's not some small thing. So when you opened up, Fiery, and talked about this is a day of mourning, I can really feel that. And as we're sitting with this, we're all having our own experience. And to try to remain grounded enough that we can not go into collapse completely. If we do for a bit, that's fine too, of course. And then coming back into presence, into kindness, into clarity, into open-heartedness, into connection. Fiery, did you want to say something here?
Hmm. Yeah, I was just looking around last night for the most current updates because we're also attending two other events today, commemoration events. Our Life is Medicine team. And I was just reading one update, 9,374 was a number that someone was offering as the number of unmarked graves, as the number of children currently located. And then that kind of made me interested in going on the TRC site. There is a Truth and Reconciliation Commission site that has records, which I've explored before, looking at the pictures from my mom's school and stuff, getting the 50% like death rate there, and tying that in with her own death at 50 years old from cirrhosis of the liver, which is a direct impact of the disease that she had in residential school, which was an epidemic in the schools and untreated, and led to many, many people in our Indigenous communities having longstanding alcohol addiction issues. It's directly related to the schools, not only emotionally, but physiologically, DNA wise. And how much blaming that we do of our mothers and of our parents in general, but our mothers in specific, without really deeply acknowledging the harms that they experienced. And so I like to drop into that on this day in particular. And then when Lynn suggested looking around my room to ground, right over my computer is a large wall-sized mural I painted right after an epidemic of child and youth suicides here in the Maritimes. I won't name the community, but that I was participated with in, I'm not sure, 2000 something. and just the calling of the youth back into our nests, into our families, into our communities, that we still have a tremendously high suicide rate, in particular amongst our two-spirit, indigiqueer, and trans youth. And I think about that too. I think about when Cole and I did a talk show a few years back um, for the TRC on Two-Spirited and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I was involved as a part of the national counseling team, as a couple of you on the call were as well. So thank you for showing up today as well. And one of the things I really realized in prepping for that discussion was that I never heard in any of the TRC discussions anything about two-spiritedness, anything about the church suppression of our sexuality and our sexual identities. And so it made me start to wonder, like, I wonder how many, like my mother, just weren't ever really able to find themselves, find who they needed to be. Yeah. So those are just a few of my, I guess, reflections in this moment. We're heading out from here to an event, local event here in Nova Scotia in Musquodoboit Harbor, where they have brought back a set of artifacts from a museum in Halifax that are the artifacts of the Mi'kmaq people here in this territory. And I went to have a look at the place names map, and there's like 80 some place names that are Mi'kmaq words that had original Mi'kmaq. This is a small island. Oh, there goes my art piece. Whoa. Good thing it's German. And it just makes me think about the Mi'kmaq ancestors here and how much suffering we witnessed in the inquiries here from the Shubenacadie School. And how much suffering there still is in the territory. And then following that, we're heading out to another sacred fire, another location at the deanery, where we're going to honor one of our elders who was a 60 scoop survivor and a beautiful, beautiful human being. And keep a sacred fire, offering them our tithes. And so I just really want to encourage everyone to, like, what are your plans for this sacred day of mourning? And I just noticed when I was looking at something last night that Justice Murray Sinclair, and I didn't listen to it, but Justice Murray Sinclair has put out a few-minute statement, like, why one day of the year? Like, this is going to take more than one day of the year to unpack and recover from and restore, and even truth-telling takes more than one day of the year. So what else can you do? Any other 360 whatever days of the year left to really learn, to really connect with, as Lynn said, if you're privileged, if you're a privileged settler, what can I do to remember that my privilege rests on the pain of the Indigenous peoples whose lands we currently co-inhabit? And I know if you're Indigenous today, I know you'll be, having to really hold your own heart. And we do hold a lot of space for people on this day supposed to be a day off. It's one of my busiest days of the year. I cannot have a day off on this day. My mind cannot quit thinking. My heart cannot quit beating painfully. I have to remember to breathe. And I have to call upon my pack, my herd, my flock to be with me on this day. My people have discovered, we survive in a pack. And as my dad used to say, the lone goose gets cooked. It literally is a hunting thing if you've ever gone goose hunting or duck hunting. So I'm just grateful for those of you present today that have supported me on my journey and that support Life is Medicine. I'm grateful for the members of Lynn's community to show up for this. We're jokingly, not jokingly, but seriously, calling it our launch of our, podcast series that we're planning on doing more work together as a community. I'm just going to place my hands on my heart and just send a beautiful beam of light from my heart to yours. For everybody who showed up today, everyone who's going to witness this at a later time, for all those in mourning today, and for all those awakening today. We're just getting the news. Let's welcome all in. And I especially want to send love to the children. Our ancestors. All my relations. We are complete.